Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm Hallie Tecco.
I'm Michael Esquivel.
And I'm Steve Krause. And every Monday, we bring you the latest in healthcare innovation as we sit down with entrepreneurs and industry experts.
So buckle up and join us as we figure out how to improve healthcare for all.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm Steve Krause, and today I'm talking to one of the GOATs of healthcare venture capital, Bryan Roberts of Venrock. Bryan joined Venrock in 1997 and invests across both life sciences and digital health sectors. He has a tremendous track record, as you'll hear, having backed scores of successful companies, including Illumina, Athena Health, 10x Genomics, and many, many more. Bryan, welcome to the Heart of Healthcare.
Steve, thanks for having me. I've been a great listener for a while. It's been fun.
That's nice coming from you. Bryan, I mentioned at the top that I believe you are one of the two GOATs in our industry when it comes to healthcare venture capital investing, the other being Annie Lamont, who we're also going to have on the podcast in a few episodes. I think the thing I admire about both of you is your sustained longevity and success in our industry, which is not an easy one to invest in, as I'm sure you know. And so I'm wondering, you've invested across a lot of different investment cycles, ups and downs. And so my first question is, what's the most important personal trait that you think you have that's allowed you to do this successfully?
Existential angst. Probably the big one. Like just total and absolute morbid fear that I'm going to suck tomorrow. I think is the big one. Like again, yeah, that would be the one that I think it matters over a long period of time. Look, I think you need to be fortunate in choosing people to work with, because in our industry, like we're helping but not doing as much. Yeah, I'm gonna go with existential angst.
I love that answer. How does it manifest itself for you? Like, what does that mean to be Bryan Roberts' head, on any given day?
Yeah, it's a miserable place to live in my head. In all honesty, it is a place where I am constantly trying to figure out what whether that's me, whether that's Venrock, whether that's portfolio companies, need to do next in a constantly unfurling world in order to not go extinct over the next horizon.
How do you manage that with balancing? I always say venture is a long twitch muscle, not a short twitch muscle when you think about a marathon, not a sprint, right? But how do you manage that existential angst in dealing with your portfolio companies and not freaking them out all the time? Because you need to have a long view.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a pretty good double click on the thing. I would describe it as, I think maybe the nice way to describe it is, I think you want to plan conservatively and dream optimistically. Okay? So my existential angst is not reactionary and is not like super short term. Like, gosh, we just raised a fund and I was like telling our LPs, I'm like, you guys check back in a decade. Like just don't pay any attention for like 10 years, right? And so I think you need to have a very long-term view, but it needs to be very performance-oriented and very constructive. And so to some degree, my existential angst, when coupled with a long-term view, means that the highs and lows in the near term are much more muted, right? Because what you're looking for is, well, what's something going to look like in 5 years or 8 years? And probably, honestly, it's a pretty good compliment to entrepreneurs who are deeply in the muck every day. And so almost have to be much more prone to the acute highs and lows. So I'm more of a keel, probably, using a boat analogy.
One good boat term. I mentioned you've invested across multiple cycles. The dot-com era, obviously soon thereafter you started at Venrock, came the Great Recession. I don't know what we call this last one, but the come down from bubble mania.
The return of sanity.
The return of sanity. A lot of our colleagues haven't, on both the investing side and the entrepreneurial side, haven't been through maybe even one cycle, right? This might be their first. What do you share with folks of how to manage through a time like this?
Yeah, I think this is actually a pretty interesting notion. I believe the truth of the matter is that 85, 90% of the people in our ecosystem, whether venture or entrepreneur, right, and probably across industry subsegments, grew up professionally in the bull market. Certainly from a leadership perspective, right, in the bull market. And for me, the thing that I talk to people about is, in that bull market, there were zero non-consensus decisions that were made.
What do you mean by that?
So leave aside whether decisions were correct or incorrect. Okay, that plays out over longer time periods, right?
Yep.
Oftentimes in our business, 3, 5, 6 years. When anybody in the bull market made a decision, when Steve Krause made a decision in 2018 to do anything at all, the people around Steve clapped. They were like, Steve, you are really smart. That's a really smart decision you made.
I fooled them.
It may have been total crap as a decision, right? But in the moment, you had nothing but support for that decision, right? Go to 2022, 2023, okay? Any decision Steve makes, people wring their hands with loathing and fear about risk and, oh my gosh, like, is that really right or not, et cetera, okay? Again, completely independent as to whether the decision was interesting and good and correct, right? And as every HBS 2x2 matrix on this topic would say, is like the interesting place to make decisions is to be right and non-consensus.
Yes.
Right? So, but in the bull market, everybody was looking for reasons to say yes, right? And so there were basically very few non-consensus decisions to be made. The interesting thing now is, I think it's a hugely interesting time to do anything in the ecosystem because everybody's nervous to do anything, right? The hitch is being comfortable at making non-consensus decisions, like prolonged, like for you to be of Don Quixote tilting at windmills for 2 years or 3 years or something, right?
It's hard.
Takes practice.
Yeah. And
right?
guts.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. The two of those. And but everybody grew up in a time period where no guts were required.
Interesting. They haven't
developed
that muscle.
Exactly.
Yeah, really interesting. Is this risk-off environment worse than the other two that you've been through? Or how do you compare it?
Honestly, I think there's always more money around than there are good ideas.
Regardless of whether you're in a down cycle or up cycle.
Exactly.
So is that a good thing for entrepreneurs or venture capitalists, or how do you think about that in your role and then as an entrepreneur?
I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, the bull market was good in that you could raise lots of money, you could raise it easily, you could raise it at high prices. It was bad because there was no real Darwinian pressure to do more with less and to be successful and to hit milestones on the money raised. Like honestly, in the bull market, you raise money, you spent it, you didn't hit your milestones, you went out and you raised an up round. Yeah. Right? You're like, there's no penalty to it, right?
Yeah.
And so again, it's less the being in the bull market versus being in a bad market. The difficult time is that transition from one to the other, right? Because that's when, and you'll see this in biotech a lot these days, like companies that raised a huge amount of money, right?
It's tough, yeah.
And their valuations were out of whack, but that wasn't actually the issue. Like you can solve valuations. What you can't solve is a business that you built from the ground up for a very permissive capital environment that then finds itself in a much more capital constrained environment, and you're doing too many programs, you've got too many people, you took big leases on space, like all that stuff. Like that is really hard.
It's hard
That's
to unwind.
really hard to deal with.
Yeah.
It's really tough to unwind. I think over the long arc, more capital constrained environments are generally better.
Yeah.
There are some businesses, I think, that if you got them started in the capital permissive environment and you were a really mature, terrific entrepreneur who didn't spend all the money wantonly, right? But you were building a business that needed a bunch of capital. Maybe Devoted Health is in this camp, right? Like, could you start Devoted today or in 2023 with all the money you need in order to get to the tipping point of scale where things make sense? Maybe.
It's tough.
I think Todd would disagree with me. I think he'd be like, sure. And I'd be like, maybe, right? But what you need to do, and like, I thought the bull market was going to end in like 2014. So literally, I called our partnership together in the fall of 2014. I was like, you guys, this is nutty. Like, this will not last. All of our growth stage businesses go raise money and then don't spend it. And I was at least a funding cycle off.
Yeah, you were 5 years off. Yeah.
Right? Like those guys, those companies, we did it. Those companies went out and they raised money and then they husband it. And they're like, fuck, like, what are we doing here? And so they spent it and then they raised money again, right? Before the bull market ended.
I want to go back to the early days of Bryan Roberts, Ph.D., I believe, in chemistry.
It was called chemistry and chemical biology by the time I got out of it.
There we go. And I heard you say you really didn't know anything about what you were doing in venture capital when you first started. And yet your first two investments right off the bat were Illumina and Athena Health. How'd you do that?
I got lucky.
What do you mean when you say you got lucky?
So Illumina was the first one. That one, honestly, was I worked harder than the rest of the venture capital industry, which is not saying a lot because what it meant was that I did diligence and offered a term sheet in the month of August in 1998. Okay.
That's not great for our industry.
Okay. And look, and I had a wonderful mentor named Tony Evan who was sort of standing behind me and being like, look, this guy's not a total moron and it's going to be okay. And a first-time CEO entrepreneur, a guy named John Stoltenagel, who then became like a wonderful 25-year relationship. Like he's the goat of genomics for sure.
Did your training in sort of basic sciences or advanced sciences, did that help that insight?
We were in the early days of SNPs. The thing I thought was interesting was I was like, wow, Affymetrix is pretty successful. They're making gene chips, but their manufacturing process is I got to put a specific piece of DNA in a specific spot, and an Illumina was going to make hybrid arrays randomly, which changed both the scale and cost of the manufacturing in it. And that was what got me to do it. And John, I thought, was wonderful. And as it turns out, John was wonderful. And he's the reason they bought Celexa to go into NGS and actually become really super successful. So that was that one. Athena Health, nobody else wanted to invest in. Like that's how I got that. That's how I got that deal. People were like, what? This is a thing? Like, why? And we had, like a bunch, I'm sure Bessemer did this too. We had invested in some of the MSO roll-ups, one called Med Partners. In like the early 90s. And what they did was they bought a bunch of doctors' practices and then tried to run them. Happily for the Athena Health folks, when they bought all those doctor practices at Med Partners, they had like 45 different IT systems. And so they were used to trying to deal with tech. And there was a guy, I forget his name, that I brought into due diligence. And he and I sat with Jonathan Bush and Todd Park for like a half a day. And literally we walked out and that guy was like, I don't know if these guys know what they have, but like this is actually going to be really good and interesting. So it was that plus I got like the single best reference call on Todd Park from a guy named Paul Markovich, who now runs Blue Shield of California, that I had like ever heard. I was like, okay, like there's something there and a great person. And that's probably been my thesis set for now the last 25 years.
And Athena was an EMR at that point?
No, not an EMR.
It was
so when I first started talking to them, they were the OBGYN birthing clinic thing, right?
Yeah.
And over the course of like the 3 or 4 months, because again, you had that kind of time because nobody else wanted to invest, in doing diligence, that started to evolve to like, we'll sell the birthing clinics and just use the revenue cycle management software that Eddie had written in order to try and keep the birthing clinics afloat. And we'll try and sell that to other people.
Okay.
And that's what it was. And like, this was so long ago, like people will laugh at this. Like one of the first things we did was like get a deal with New England Bell to try and wire up doctors' offices for non-dial-up internet.
Yeah.
Right?
Good old days.
Yeah, no, they were not good. It's way better today.
I mean, you've now been in the investing in digital health for several decades now. It sometimes feels like the more things change, the more they stay the same in our industry. How do you sort of put in context where we are, and how optimistic are you that things have really changed? Because, you can make the bull case, you can make the bear case, but where do you think we are?
I think that we're still in the first quarter of this game. And to me, the first quarter of the game is keeping people out of hospital beds, which is where all the money's spent. Really.
Are we doing a good job at that?
Overall, no. In pockets, I think we have done a much better job of it, right? When you look at the globally capitated primary care docs in MA, there's a bunch of them that are doing a really good job. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not rocket science, right? Like when you call some of those folks, they're like, yeah, well, now I don't put on my voicemail, if it's after hours, go to the ER, right? So again, it's not rocket science, but I think we are doing a better job of it, but there's still lots to go. Like the industry's so large. And to be clear, the incentive structures are so screwy.
They're so messed up, yeah.
Right? Like the notion that the fox is guarding the hen house in so many different places, right? Whether it's PBMs charging a percentage of list price of the drugs, right?
It's like real estate brokers. It's just like real estate brokers. The incentives are messed up. I'm curious, though, one thing on you mentioned sort of the move to keeping people out of hospital beds, and I agree. I've always been, as a human being and intellectually, so wanting value-based care to work in our industry, and yet it's taken a long time, and it's still a question of are we going to get there? How do you feel about what CMMI's done? Because it feels like it's pockets, to your point, of innovators, folks like Farzad at Aledade, which I know you've invested in, and others. You can point to a lot of them they're pushing the ball up the hill. And then CMMI, I mean, they have a lot of programs, and yet it feels like they constantly underfund these programs. What do you think about that? Is that fair to say?
Somewhere between I don't think so and I don't know. Honestly, you're dealing with a counterparty, the people who provide healthcare services, health systems, hospitals, et cetera, who their vested interest is to stay around and continue to make money.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a situation whereby, as we get to whether it's value-based care or just more efficient, better care, leave aside any value judgment on it, right? Every industry segment on the planet Earth hopefully makes forward progress to be more efficient and more excellent over time, right? In healthcare, there's a counterparty that is basically all labor and CapEx.
Yes.
Right? I oftentimes compare health systems to airplanes, right? The fixed costs there are enormous, and the marginal operating income only comes in the last 5 or 10 or 15%. Right, of total full capacity. Those guys figure out ways. There's been for the last year, there's been this huge hullabaloo about V28 in Medicare Advantage, right?
Right.
It'd be super interesting to get a little pool of semi-knowledgeable people and say, what percentage of the V28 decrement do you think healthcare providers will figure out a way to recoup in some other manner?
Oh,
right?
I bet a lot.
Half?
Yeah.
Something like that.
For sure.
I remember years ago, there was a spike in Delaware of sepsis because it pays more and revenue was under fire.
Oh,
that
man,
year.
That's sad.
Right? And it was sepsis of unknown origin, which codes for a bunch more money, right? And, way better than the flu or whatever the heck the person actually came in with. So it's this never-ending war because to some degree, you're putting some people out of business.
Yeah, which is threatening.
And that's hard.
Yeah. Bryan, you said we're in first quarter. I was interested you were pointing towards more efficient care, whether or not you call it value-based care. I would have thought quarter one would have been the digitization of our industry. So What do you think about that? Where do we stand?
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're probably right from a blocking and tackling perspective.
Yeah.
For me, the reason I called it quarter one was, to me, the easy low-hanging fruit is hospital bed stays. At some point, we're going to get efficient at that, right? And then we're going to have to find another source of efficiency to get out of this. And I actually tell you the truth, I don't know what the next one is.
You don't? I was going to ask what quarter two is.
Yeah, I don't know what the next one is. Maybe quarter two is. I was shocked when I learned that for all the high prices of drugs, et cetera, that 50% doesn't go to the pharma company. Okay, just goes to the middleman, right? And when you think about channels in any industry, like, can you think of any other industry where it's 50%, where 50% doesn't go to the innovator?
I'll have to think about that. I don't know.
I've tried and I can't come up with it, right? Like 20 points, 30 points for fulfillment, supply, delivery, like all that stuff. Maybe, sure. Like that's sales and marketing costs, essentially, more or less, right? 50%? Like, oh, are you kidding me? So like, and it's possible, right? Like as we get better at care, probably there's more drugs. Like as much people whine about drug costs, like it's definitely cheaper than going to the hospital, right? But those costs are rising because they're pulling it out of procedures and stuff like that, and extending lives. So I don't know. I guess my bets, if I had to bet, inning two is either drug costs mostly coming out of the middlemen, or is that flurry of costs at end of life.
Yeah.
We could be way better at that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But yes, I agree. There's a lot of costs there, and frankly, emotional decision making but there's a lot of costs there. There's
100%.
a lot of costs and unnecessary. Hey, curious for you. I mean, you're in the heart of Silicon Valley. Venrock is a Bessemer multi-stage, multi-industry venture firm. You're early. You have tech partners. They must look at you and say, Bryan, what the fuck is wrong with the healthcare industry when it comes to adopting technology? How do you justify to your partners, like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah, well, for better or worse, I'd give you two answers. To my partners, they're like, it seems, Bryan, like you're going to have a job for a while. So so that's good, right?
Security.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, like I'm sure, but working in healthcare, you get this. Like the anecdotes that you get for saving people's lives are amazing. Like,
oh yeah.
You like. And again, we struggle certainly in the U.S., maybe globally, about healthcare as a right versus a business, and it's a really tricky thing. Okay, but we're involved in what's now called included health, right? Which is both navigation and virtual care, and the stories there, or the stories at Devoted, or the stories at Virta of I'll give you Virta again. So they help reverse diabetes. Like there are patients out there who their lives have changed so much, they've tattooed the Virta logo on them.
I know. That's one of my favorite things. Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that is a reason to keep working on this stuff.
Does AI change the landscape for healthcare?
For sure.
It's not non-consensus right now. It feels like everybody's flocking towards it. How do you think about it?
Yeah. So the place that I think AI dramatically improves healthcare in the near term is indirectly. I'll give you a couple of different examples. One, I think for all of the businesses that you and I invest in, which I love and are not Google margins, and never will be, okay? Yeah. I think the application of AI in those businesses will drop 5 to 10 points to the bottom line.
Just some better efficiency.
But yes, exactly. Better scalability, better service, better efficiency, fewer people, like the whole thing. And that will certainly make valuations much better, but it's also going to take cash flow and allow it to be reinvested in the businesses. That's one. Two, I think it will be hugely beneficial on the admin side. of healthcare, right? And as you know, right, like 16 admin people for every provider or something. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
right?
10. Yeah.
So like that way you could do it terrifically. The question to what does AI do on the clinical side of healthcare?
Yeah.
Leave aside reading radiology exams or something, but in actual treatment, more complicated. I think it will help. I think it will take longer. I think there will be doctors, doctors, you and me, we're all flawed in various, and sundry ways. So I think doctors will push back on it, right, et cetera. Like, nobody could do this like me. Like, we all go through all that stuff, right? Heck, AI probably comes for your and my job too, at some point. But I think that is longer and trickier. But I think it'll happen.
What's the timeline for that in your mind?
Clinically?
Or what's the unlock? Yeah.
I think the unlock is some amount of time that people get used to AI as a co-pilot rather than a replacement.
And the doctors and nurses or...
Exactly. And just learning, just like getting used to it. And I'm sure the AI will get better over that time period too. Like, there will be absolute improvements. Like, there will also just be less newness to it and stuff like that.
I've looked at these, I'm sure you have, the pathology AI companies. And it's still crazy that the American Pathology Association, whatever union it is, because I love doctors, I respect them deeply, but they're unions and representing their members. And, in America, the AI is better than most community pathologists and probably better than most academic medical center pathologists at doing first reads. And yet still we have laws that say doctors have to do the first read. Doesn't it make sense to have the AI do the first read and the doctor, when it's an ambiguous or uncertain read, do the second read? And yet the technology's there and we're not there.
100%. And look, let's be clear. Healthcare is the largest employer in most counties in the U.S.
Right. It's a huge political force. Yeah.
Puts a lot of dinner on a lot of tables. And so, like, that is absolutely going to be like, what was it, 15 years ago when they did the Army base closures? Like, we didn't need a lot of Army base. Like, and this will make that angst and stuff look small.
Yeah. I'm curious, I'm sure you get asked this all the time. Where are the exits? Where are the IPOs? Your guess is probably as good as mine of when they come and what they'll be. But does AI change the game in that you've been around long enough, and so have I, to see Google and Microsoft and Apple, and the list goes on and on. They've all tried to make plays in healthcare. And for the most part, they've failed. There's some exceptions. Does this change the game of those tech companies? I mean, if you think about it, the delivery and payment of care is not their expertise, but technology is. Do you think this gets them into the market or not?
It may make it more attractive to them so that they treat it less like a sidelight and it's actually valuable and interesting because, as you know, it's a huge market. I don't think, I'll give you an example. So we're in an ambient scribe company called Suki. You guys are probably in one too.
We're in a bridge. Yeah.
Great.
We're in a bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually I'd be interested in what the Abridge guys told you, or maybe. So we got started early enough that when we got started, it was ML, voice rec. It wasn't ambient, right? But it was like we can take on nuance, okay? And they built all the pipes into the different EMRs, and they built the product and the this and the that, okay? What was it, like November of 22 or something, AI like bursts onto the scene. And it took Suki like 6 weeks to put AI into the product and have it be ambient.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, and to one extent, you're like, that's awesome. AI is so powerful. And my reaction, this probably goes back to our earlier discussion about existential angst. I was like, holy shit, that wasn't hard at all.
There's going to be a million competitors. Yeah.
Right? But what it says is it's not the long pole in the tent for success. Like, it makes the product is magical. I'm sure you guys see this as a bridge too. Like, it is, that awesome. Product is so much better than it was pre-AI. Like, totally. And like, every doctor should have it. Like, and I will tell this to anybody listening to this podcast. Like, I kind of care who you use because I'm biased, but whatever, use somebody because it's going to save you hours. Right. Like, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Your life's going to change. Yeah.
Your life's going to change. Okay. But the AI part's not the long pole in the tent. It's the other pieces. It's the user interface. It's the pipes into the EMRs. It's all the other pieces. And that's the stuff because
it's a distribution. It's a distribution.
You got it, right?
Yeah.
And you've got, healthcare has so many different parties. And parties, again, another thing for people to take with this, most businesses in healthcare are cruddy net margin businesses. Outside of pharma, right? Pick it. You can look at them. Payers, hospital, like all doctors, everybody's like, I save a ton of lives and I don't make enough money.
Yeah, no,
right?
That's true.
So they're all fighting for revenue and margin.
We've talked a lot about your successes. We at Bessemer, as you probably know, publish our anti-portfolio, which is part of our culture to be intellectually honest about our misses. I'm curious, what's your biggest miss, whether it be a company or a macro space that you just whiffed on?
I'll give you two. One that I think when you guys have misses, yours are mostly like stuff you didn't invest in.
That is
right?
correct. Yes. The
I'll
stuff
give
that
you
we
one
saw
of those.
and for some reason we just,
Yeah, you're like, I'm an idiot. I didn't do it. So I'm going to give you one of those, and I'm going to give you one that we did invest in that, especially now, like just hurts me to my soul that it didn't work. Okay. So the one that I didn't invest in, so I was in a biotech company. It was originally called Concurrent, a computer-based drug discovery. A guy named Jack Baldwin, super great med chemist. Now I think he's probably passed away because he was old when I knew him. He was at Combinatorics before that, and a guy who worked for him as a postdoc at Combinatorics was a guy who'd come from China named Gu Li.
Yep.
And he called me, and he's like, hey, Bryan, this postdoc of mine, Gu, wants to start a CRO in China. This is like in 2002 or 2003, okay?
Yeah. This is
and
Wuxi,
like,
right?
Yeah, 100% is Wuxi. So like, I was like, China is a long ways away, right? Like it was so stupid. And it's a services business.
You're like, it's August. I can't go to China.
Exactly, no. All right. And fuck, I missed that. God, that was terrible. Anyway, so that would have been great to do. The other one is a biotech company, okay, that had developed a 6-month or year subcutaneous implant of a GLP-1 exenatide.
Wow.
Called Intarsia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. Kurt, right?
Kurt Graves.
Yeah.
And when you think now about GLP-1s and obesity, and what if you had 100% compliance and once every 6 or 12-month dosing you could do for people, okay? And they got crosswise with the FDA in a way that I still don't actually understand. Because I personally don't think there was any difference really in their data from a bunch of other people's data. But the nausea, vomiting, leading to dehydration in kidney impaired folks turned out to be a freak out thing for Intarsia, whereas for the other companies, it sort of, was like, well, watch it, or I don't know. Like, I don't know.
That's the one that kills you.
That kills me. Like, because that should have been an enormous return. But think about the problem with drugs is that if people don't take them, they don't get helped.
One of the things I admire about you, in addition to obviously the investing track record as a human, is you guys at Venrock put out really good content.
Thanks.
You and Bob, and you do your annual prognosis.
Bob's
I encourage
awesome.
people. Bob is great. Encourage people to go look at it if you haven't. I'm curious, as you think about 2025, we're rounding into the fourth quarter. What's your one prediction that you would make for our industry?
I think there's going to be senior leadership upheaval in some of the large businesses out there. Paying too much for acquisitions late in the bull market, V28, getting overly enamored of MA. You saw Humana this morning.
Yeah.
Just
and
announced that,
CVS even. The
yeah,
CVS,
right. So
rumors of
CVS
Aetna.
is
Yeah,
right. And I think stars are just dropping now for this year. Like Humana went from 94% to like 25% of their population. Like you're like, holy moly.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
So I think there's just going to be more changing.
That doesn't bode well for our companies. And I guess long-term view it would, to your long-term view. Short-term, it probably means less acquisitive acquisitions if there's so much upheaval.
When we're coming off of like the Teladoc Livongo merger in the bull market, like everything's bad compared to that sort of stuff, right? Look, I think we got to build businesses with a 10 or 15 year time horizon. And then like, I would encourage you, like, create optionality for yourself, like be able to run something independently. And then if someone comes along and wants to pay you too much money for it, sell it to them.
Take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, this has been awesome. As I said, a person I admire in this industry. So thanks for all you do, and thanks for coming on The Heart of Healthcare.
Thanks a ton. It was a fun chat.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe. The Heart of Healthcare is produced by Hallie Tecco and hosted by Michael Esquivel, Steve Krause, and Hallie Tecco. The show is engineered, edited, and mixed by Kyle Moore. Visit our website, heartofhealthcarepodcast.com, for show notes and details.